Hey, my name's ShawNshawN. I sell art on ShawNshawN.co. Today we're going to review Last Night in Soho. So this is a movie by Edgar Wright. Time is 1 hour and 56 minutes, so a little longer than an hour and a half, but there's a really nice character development here. So I think the time is justified. I didn't feel like you could cut it anywhere. Actors are Thomasin McKenzie as Elois. Aimee Cassettari plays Elois' mother. Rita Tushingham plays Peggy. Synnove Karlsen plays Jocasta. Rigg plays Miss Collins. So it's a story of this young girl. She's lived her whole life kind of in the countryside. Her mother committed suicide when she was younger. And she's off to the big city. And her grandma's like, hey, be careful. Call me. Make sure you're enjoying. She's like, yeah, okay, grandma. Be careful. The big city. There's bad apples out there. And she's like, okay, whatever. And so she wanders away to London. This country bumpkin girl, and she's kind of settling into the dorms. It kind of goes okay, but then her roommate's kind of a party girl, and they don't really bond totally. So she's like, oh, let me get the hell out of here and get my own room. So she gets her own room above this cafe, and is with this old lady there. So she's like, oh, this would be cool, have her own space, doesn't have to deal with all the college dorm drama. So for her, it's perfect, right? Because she was starting to react with all the college girl, just like, oh my God, it's way too much. But then she starts having these dreams, and the dreams are really mysterious of this. She pictures herself as this glamorous girl who's a singer and come to the big city in London, but it's in the 1960s. She's like, wow, these are really cool dreams, right? And so she starts styling her hair that way, and before she knows it, she's like really kind of glamorized to the 60s. She already loves 60s music, and so this just further gets her into it. But then it becomes like, it takes a sinister turn with this kind of young dancer that she's following along, and it kind of turns into a nightmare versus a dreamscape later on in the movie. So she's like, oh my God, what the hell is this? She's trying to escape her dreams, and then she uncovers a crime, and then she's like, oh my God, I have to investigate. This girl was murdered. How do I figure this out? And so that's kind of the crux of the story setup. I think they did a really good job with the 1960s sets. They had the right car, MG. My dad drove that car. The guys' suits, and they would go to these gentlemen's clubs, and it's all guys, obviously, and just the girls, which, it's the same reality to this day, right? Just great costumes and sets in the field. They have this really creepy John life of Sandy, this poor girl who's a dancer, and then she gets swindled into being a hooker instead. It's terrible, right? And, unfortunately, Eloise is starting to live this, dreams of this ex-prostitute, and it's like, oh my God, this is so horrible, right? Her lifestyle, and she's trying to escape of this. She doesn't like it anymore. This is great slow build from the reality of today's world to this dreamscape world of the 60s, and it's very appealing, and then later turns into a nightmare, and then it becomes full circle back to real life, solving this crime like that happened in the 60s, who did it, kind of mystery. So it's a really nice flow for that. They have this really interesting concept of ghosts seen through mirrors. So Elois pictures herself as this girl, and they kind of touches the mirror, and then all of a sudden it switches places, and she is the dancer, and she sees herself in the reflection as herself, but in reality, she's this beautiful dancer. So it's a really interesting concept, a way to show ghosts in a new way. I really like that concept. I think it worked really well in the film. And they do have, I think there's 2 jump scares in here, but they're really well planned out. They kind of come out of left field, which is exactly what you want in a jump scare. And the best thing, too, is one of the jump scares, at least, they had serious consequences to one of the characters right after the jump scare. So that's great. So it's not just a jump scare to scare you, and then, the antagonist or protagonist keeps going along. Actually, some character, just like all of a sudden is like, oh my God, what are we going to do now? So it's great. It's actually a plot twist on top of a jump scare. So it's a really good combination. And I think the second jump scare was this too, but I don't quite remember it. But it was both the jump scares they use really, really get you pretty good. There's a great misdirection in the plot as the girl kind of uncovers what's going around her with the visions and where the story of this poor dancer, Sandy, as her life went into, complete misery of being a hooker versus being a dancer, right? So it's kind of like this really great misdirection in the plot, but not in the sense that they had like these false plot leads. It was just kind of, it slowly evolves, and you're like, oh, it goes this way, and then, oh, it goes a little bit this way, and it goes a little bit this way. But it doesn't feel like they're doing dead end kind of stuff with Some mysteries do that, and I like the really organic kind of flow of the plot. It felt very natural. You also have kind of this backstory of the mother who also probably had visions and is always in the mirrors anyway with Elois. So Elois is like, oh, I see my mother in there. And so, that was kind of why she lived in the countryside with her grandma, because she doesn't want to be in too much of an urban environment. She might get triggered by this. So that's why her grandma is kind of worried about she goes to the big city and there might run into more mirrors and all this stuff. So it's kind of a really interesting thing. You have the backstory of the mother committed suicide mysteriously when she went to London to also be a clothing designer. So, is a young girl going to commit suicide? What's going to happen with her? So it has a great back setup for the daughter. Is she going to turn out like a mother? Or is she going to survive and be like her grandmother? And does her grandma have dreams or not? Maybe her grandma doesn't, so that's why she survived, but the mother doesn't. So it has this really nice combination, I think. There's this great clash between 1960s music, which this girl likes for some mysterious reason, and it's her grandma's music, but she loves it, versus her peers who are losing the 2010s music, so they completely don't relate to her, and it's a great clash of culture clash there. I thought that was really cool. Because the kids would totally make fun of someone listening to the 1960s only versus 2010s or something, right? It's kind of a setup, it's a great character flaw, so to say, for Eloise, but also, standing her character apart. And Eloise, kind of this outcast character, has a little bit of feel of Carrie, not as extreme as Carrie, because Carrie was so well, she was such a quirky character, but again, this character is quirky, so you're like, uh-oh, is she going to be outcast by her peers? And she kind of escapes the drama by moving out to her own apartment, but then the own apartment turns out to be a worse environment than the college life down the road. At first, it seems like a great combination with this great dreamscape, but then it turns into nightmares, so... It's also, too, they have this kind of sex scene. Elois finally gets kind of seduced, but, it triggers her kind of to have these dreams again, so... in a way, it's very symbolic of what a rape victim would go through. Like when they would have someone try to seduce them again, it might be a nice person, but because they had been raped before, it's going to obviously trigger that feeling of panic and fear and just to immediately relive all the feelings. So it's kind of symbolic, an analogy for rape in that case. And I thought they covered that really well because you kind of see the terrible life that Sandy lived through with these ghosts. Yeah, the way that movie ends is a really great way to end the movie. I really liked it. I think they did a really great job with this. It's a great mystery, and yeah, just, really put together, well filmed. At first, I wasn't excited to see it. I was like, oh, it's a teen movie, suspense. I'm like, okay, whatever, some teeny boppy girl story. But then it turns out really nice. Halfway through the film, you're like, ooh, this is getting really interesting as a mystery. So I'd encourage you to see it. It's definitely a really cool watch. More of a girls' film, but I think it was really well shot. If you like to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.